Lovely. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see so many new and already known faces today. I'm here with Vince Connelly from Connelly Associates. He very kindly agreed to organize this today. And we're going to talk a little bit about a crazy project I started in the middle of the pandemic, the Donor Participation Project, and about other things that Vince has going on. Vince, would you like to add anything?
Sure, just very briefly want to welcome and thank everyone for coming in. Thanks to Louis for taking time out of his very busy schedule to do this today, but also I think a lot of you are participating in the Donor Participation Project. There's over 1,000 people from not just around the country, but around the world involved in this great project. And it was one of those great things that Louis started during the pandemic, especially needed then. And it's just really grown and obviously helping people directly there. But what we're doing today is taking some of the lessons learned from those 1,000 some odd participants from a wide variety of nonprofits in a wide variety of locations so that we can share them all with you folks. And if you haven't already considered joining the Donor Participation Project, I asked Louis to mention it's really his project, but I'd encourage you to take a look at that and encourage others to do so as well. Louis very kindly has joined my team at Connelly Associates as one of our of-council folks. We have a few of the other of-council members on the webinar today. We can tell you more about that. If you have any questions, let me know. But Louis is our annual giving expert, so it's very appropriate that he's doing the webinar today. I'll mute and get off, but I just want to say thanks again to everybody for joining us.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Vince. We appreciate you. So I will be showing slides in a second, hence the big screen, but welcome again. I'm seeing folks connect, Chris Gallegos and lots of DPP members. Please do say hi in the chat. And during the presentation, if you have any questions, chat in or raise your hand and we'll try to answer them on the fly, but we'll also have time at the end for Q&A. My name is Louis. I'm the Executive Director of Annual Giving with Muhlenberg College. I also started this community really about a year and a month ago, so last October. And it's been something truly special. And I'd love to share a little bit of what we've learned here. I think we're discovering new ways of doing things in mostly annual giving, but I really call them donor participation adjacent areas. So it involves donor relations, it involves major gift officers too. It involves advancement services. So we really take a wide view of how to solve the problem of donor participation. For anybody who's hasn't heard about this before, there is a problem, and that is that donor participation has been on the decline over the last several decades, so that now less than half the number of households give per year than used to even just 10 years ago. I thought that was a problem, and instead of kind of complaining about it, I thought, well, let's get a group together and start brainstorming solutions, see who is actually being able to move the needle and learn from each other. Again, if you have questions, chat in. And first, I'll give you a really quick introduction of myself so you can understand where this is coming from. I used to be orchestral violist. I studied music. I thought I was going to be a professional musician. And alas, advancement and development took me over. I was at the Lincoln Center for an internship, and I met there a legendary fundraiser that was there, and kind of I got bit by the fundraising bug, if such a thing exists. I also have a parallel life as an economist. I did all the way to a PhD. It was kind of my pact with my family. I wanted to be a musician. They wanted me to study business. And I started out not liking it at all. Then I got my MBA. Then I liked it a little bit. And then I liked it a lot. And I got a PhD. So that was about it. My wife is also a musician, just so folks know. So the main gist of the presentation today is that we're really in some ways in a new fundraising world, even if lots of the principles and the same old principles and relationship principles still apply, the environment in which we are working as fundraisers has changed. So I've put some headlines here to illustrate this, the statistic I was mentioning below about the decline in number of donors giving to nonprofits, it has been gradual, and it has added up over time, and now it's significant. So you're going to say, well, yes, but last year, or well, yes, but the last recession. The thing with this trend is that it has continued through recessions, through boom periods, through emergencies, and it keeps going down. So the sense of urgency was, we need to start changing our practices now. Just doing more and optimizing more of what we were already doing is just not working, right? I kind of see this problem as related to a decline in trust in what used to be institutions that people looked up to, churches, universities, nonprofits, other newspapers, right? And so the quote, the very last quote is from the Edelman Trust Barometer. They measure trust in businesses, in nonprofits, in government every year. And this year in the pandemic, the last issue of the Trust Barometer, for the first time, people trusted businesses more than nonprofits. So they think they're more ethical and competent than nonprofits. So that's really an issue that I had a chance to chat with the CEO of Edelman, and he says it's a communications issue, and it might be. Let's kind of talk about it together in a little while. So in the middle of all of this, and because of all of this, I called the group together to get our heads together every month under sessions that we call lunch analysis, and we have a speaker come talk to us about a topic that's usually in fundraising. We've had case studies, but we've also had our very first presentation, which I'll talk to you about in a second. It was about somebody from the Harvard Divinity School who did a presentation on why millennials were flocking to some organizations and not others. We've had professors talk about nonprofit communications. We've had the University of Tennessee tell us how they've been doing so well with their donor participation. We've had tech sessions about marketing automation. So it's been really a little bit of everything. So what I'm going to share today are kind of my big takeaways from this. But there's definitely been a lot more, and we can talk about it when we get to the conversation. I'm not seeing the chat right now. So Vince or anybody else, if you want to interrupt and ask a question as I go, please do. So we started this getting together. Now there's over 1,000 of us. One of the first sessions, as we discussed, was touched on the topic of community. So this Angie Thurston from the Harvard Divinity School at the time was thinking, why are less and less people going to church, being involved in a religious life, And she started, they looked at the problem in a really interesting way. She said, well, why don't we study organizations that are attracting millennials and see what they are doing that's different from what maybe traditional organizations are doing. And so they weren't just looking at religious organizations. They looked at places like CrossFit, a nonprofit called the Dinner Table, which helps people cope with grieving of lost ones. And one of the main takeaways of this is that these organizations all showed a sense of community, or provided a sense of community. And then she followed that up with, well, community is kind of an overused word, anything means community now, but more like deep community. So what usually happens in these places is that people come for the workout, to express themselves artistically, to have dinner with people that are in a similar situation as they are, or whatever. But then they stay for the community. And if you read a lot of what the tech world is talking about and implementing now, they see community as kind of a customer retention machine. So they've also kind of hit on that aspect. You may be asking, well, okay, but what is community? That's a word. What does that exactly mean, and how do I do it? So I went down a path where I started researching this topic, and I came on these 4 primary aspects. There are many others probably, and you can probably think of them as you reflect on your own experience and that of others. But these 4 aspects I I remember them because of their initials, PPRI. So a community is when people get together in ways that are purposeful, participatory, recurring, and that identify and develop leaders. So purposeful is because you're getting together and it's not about just having fun or a party. It's not only a social occasion, right? We're getting here to do something, to help somebody, to advocate for somebody, or a cause or something. It's participatory because you're not just sitting down and hearing lectures from people. You're not just the recipient of somebody else's, knowledge download. It's a two-way conversation. It's recurring. And this is a place where lots of nonprofits get the first two, but then they just do one-offs, right? So it's deep community is something that happens with a certain periodicity. And that's an important part of it because it makes people feel more secure, more trusting in the process. And then finally, it identifies and develops leaders. So when you start doing this, you need to start asking who will help more, who will lift their hand to help. And in our world, obviously, who will step up and give more, right? So it meets this function of the infamous pipeline development. So let me see, just gathering my thoughts here for a moment. One of our next sessions, so this topic of community was, I would say, a big pillar of what we've discovered over the last year. Another topic of our sessions was monthly giving. So I'd always thought, well, and I'm sure all of you have read about this, well, it is such a good idea, why aren't more nonprofits doing it? And we didn't really answer that question, but what we did is we asked a membership director from the public radio, Nicole Stern, who had been featured in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, to come and speak with us. And she did this presentation on monthly giving, which, for kind of just to have a definition for everybody, are those unlimited monthly recurring gifts. So she did a presentation on this. And it was just like a masterclass on how to do it. In fact, I took this framework and I applied it at work, and the results have been pretty impressive. The main takeaway from this was that monthly giving is not just an add-on. So you won't be successful at monthly giving if you just start it as a program, a checkbox in a gift form, something that's on the side. It has to be the main way that people give to you. And I was reflecting on this and thinking, well, it's a little bit like Netflix, right? So if you could just get Netflix for a night and pay maybe $3, most people would do that, right? They wouldn't subscribe for $7.95 per month. But the idea is that monthly donors have a much higher retention rate and a much higher lifetime giving value, lifetime value. So between those two things, the effect is just explosive. But you really have to commit to it. It's a change in the business model. It implies changes in your operations, in advancement services, in your marketing, on your website. There's a little bit more to it than just slapping a checkbox and saying you have a monthly giving program. So that was in pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 were nonprofit communications. Communities, we learned in one of the sessions, are fed with content. It can't just be any content. So like the usual kind of corporate sounding or official sounding content isn't really what's successful and that makes people connect, but you do need content. So for instance, Connelly Associates does webinars, right? And this is content. And hopefully you find this to be authentic. Vince does these regularly, etc. But you need this. And the last point is that content really does have to be much, 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 much more frequent than most nonprofits are used to. And 100x, okay, that's an exaggeration. But think of just having the annual report, all the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into that, when in fact you should probably be communicating pieces of that 3 and 4 times per day or weekly, or in all types of frequencies. So with your donor. So that was a really important lesson learned too. It can be as simple as getting on a Zoom with leadership or with program directors and recording that. So it can really be done very inexpensively. I'm going to go into the Zoom now again. And Vince, do we have any questions? And maybe we can talk a little bit of what people are saying, just to do a pause before going on and wrapping up. Connor was sharing, not all nonprofits has monthly or recurring giving programs because they don't have the capacity to manage it. Well, that is correct. From an advancement operations perspective, think that you're going to have 12 times the volume of gifts to process, for instance. That's a capacity, that could be a capacity issue. What I found is not so much, it's not successful when you just add it on. So it's not one more thing. You really have to change everything that you're already doing. So your appeals, your giving form, it has to default to monthly. Your calling program, if you have one, the monthly ask has to go first. It's new. What I can say is that it's something new. I don't know if it really adds more work, but it does involve change. I wonder who may have contributed to that trust issue over about 4 years. Well, the interesting part here is that it is a trend that has gone through all types of political cycles, economic cycles. It seems a little bit bigger than that. The best explanation I found is that the amount of information available for people has exploded. And there's some charts where really it used to be that you could get information from your newspapers, your community organizations, your church, and your university, right? Now it just the amount of just gigabytes and terabytes of data that's available for anyone has increased exponentially. So what that has meant is that people have formed their own bubbles. And it's really hard to break into those bubbles. So now, even if your nonprofit says something, that can immediately be there can be a counter narrative very easily that gathers its own momentum on social media or in other networks. So thinking of our communications in terms of kind of infiltrating these networks is, to me, kind of the way to go. So either entering existing communities or creating new ones. So yes, absolutely. If there are any questions, I will be glad to answer them. Well, I'll wrap this up and we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So remember, we talked about nonprofit communications, about deep community, and about monthly giving, but we also have spoken about tons and tons of really cutting edge topics that have been really interesting. We talked about virtual fundraisers. We did one at work that was successful. We talked about esports fundraising or charity streaming for those that are maybe in that area. It's when somebody that has a following on sites like Twitch raises money for a cause. And some organizations are leveraging this, and there's a whole ecosystem there. And they are raising a fair amount of money. We spoke about topics like marketing automation. We had a study group that met over several sessions. And this was about tools like Zapier and others that let you automate parts of your work. It can be as simple as when a gift comes in my email, generate a thank you note and put it in my drafts so I can review it. I actually have that at work right now, and it's been amazing. The favorite part of my mornings is going into my drafts folder, seeing all those thank you notes, personalizing them for each donor, and actually sending them a really nice thank you note within 48 hours of their gift. If I wait for our other processes to kick in, it can be 2, 3, 4 weeks. So that's really important. Case studies, we spoke with William and Mary, with University of Tennessee, and other organizations. That has been really interesting too. Donor experience mapping, which is a new way of, it's a way inspired by design thinking to think of how our donor evolves, a little bit like we've thought of the donor development continuum over the years. but it's a really more holistic way. And the power that it has is more in aligning everybody in your shop behind that common, that agreed upon strategy. And we're just really getting started with this. So I invite everybody who's interested to join. All of this has been driven by volunteers. We're very grateful for. We don't have our general membership is only practicing fundraisers. So there's not that, vendors, tech vendors, et cetera, can present, but they can't really join our directory and our chat group, et cetera. So it's really a kind of a safe environment to talk about things in what's really happening, our real problems. And we'll have, I know there are members here today connected, which I'm very lucky that they decided to join. And if you want to share your experiences in a bit, we'll do that. But we're also doing tons of fun stuff. So if I don't do this, well, I'll show you my t-shirt in a moment. That's why I'm wearing a t-shirt, not a shirt today. But we're doing breakout groups. So every month after our main session, we have a smaller breakout sessions. And we have groups on major gifts, annual gifts, academic fundraising, social services. We just started one for independent schools, which we will be announcing in our session tomorrow. So I invite everybody that's here that's interested in that to kind of check it out. We're doing a kind of a think tank series of sessions talking about the future of conferences. That's led by Matthew Manfra. And we're kind of saying, well, I don't know if folks on this call will agree with me, but conferences just focus on the success stories. They don't seem very realistic. They kind of seem to be pushing a product a lot of the time. What does this new virtual world mean for conferences, and what do people need to really improve their craft and their results? So t-shirts, and we have a donor participation project app too. You see the little photo on the right. So we don't get bored. And the fundamental part is that this is an incredible group of fundraisers that gathers together, and we really do generate ideas off of one another. Lots of our presenters are members of the group, and we have great fun in the meantime. So that marks the end of the presentation today. I want to thank Vince for the time. I will remove the spotlight on me. And I'm happy to just talk about what we just heard, this focus monthly gifts, nonprofit communications, deep community, all the other fun stuff we're doing. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So have folks here been, are folks here worried about their number of donors declining? Are folks here not worried because they're actually being successful at increasing their number of donors? We'd really love to learn from you. Vince, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. One thing I think you and I actually bonded originally. Thank you. I primarily do capital campaigns and fundraising staff searches, as I think a lot of you know. So with campaigns, generally tend to be focused on the larger gifts, as you should be. I'm sort of a little bit different, that I really believe the public phase and the participation, getting everybody involved is very, very important. But I truly believe that it is a problem. First of all, I think you're dead on. I think most people would agree with that. I think it's fixable. I think it truly is fixable. And even if somebody says, oh, but all the money's in the big gifts, I have two words to say. And Louis, I think you know what these are going to be. Michael Bloomberg. I think most people know that Michael Bloomberg's first gift to Hopkins, when he was very much younger and really getting started his career, was what most people would consider a very modest gift. I think if you talk to anyone who works in fundraising at Hopkins, or really in the fundraising universe, if they were to be asked, do you think it was important to get him involved early and participating and giving? I think most of us know what Michael Bloomberg has done to support Hopkins more recently. I think most people would say yes. So I think this is the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. And I do think it's doable, but it's going to take some focus. It's going to take some investment. And I think Louis and the Donor Participation Project, just getting like-minded people together to kick around some ideas, and this will work at this independent school, this will work at that major university. I did post a quote that I use a lot that is most often attributed to Mark Twain. I think Mark Twain got a lot of credit for a lot of great quotes that he didn't really say, but it doesn't really matter. The quote is, it's not, it's what you think you know, that just isn't so, that gets you into trouble. And I think there are a lot of assumptions made around annual giving and fundraising that essentially get us into trouble. So I think these opportunities for the webinars, the participation project with Lewis, all those things, we've got to do something, and this is a good first step to that.
So Vince, that gift was $5, as I think you know, from Michael Bloomberg. But I want to go back to something maybe that Kat asked and just get your thoughts on it further around, you know, the inundation of communications with COVID and other things, right? People having so much being thrown at them, and some of our donors saying, I completely agree with you in terms of the amount of communication we should be giving people and how we tailor that. But we have seen, right, in the last 18 months, a lot of people pulling back and saying, I'm getting information overload, way too much going on. Any thoughts on how to combat that? I mean, my gut tells me, right, you need to make it personal. You need to have that ability to talk with people in a way that gets their attention by that personal aspect. But I'd love to hear more thoughts on that.
So I think I would say, you know, we need to make things more opt-in. We just send email blasts too often in a kind of unsegmented way that assumes things from people. If you're using social media is a great place to do that work for you. You know, because the algorithms show your content to people who are more likely to be interested. So, you know, that's a good piece. But then, you know, nonprofits say, well, you know, we don't get a lot of traction on our content. Well, that's the content's, you know, it's because you probably don't have enough, and it's too corporate, right? You know, so kind of fix the problem where it is. I think there's some just talking about the donor participation project on LinkedIn, you know, I think there's proof out there that it can work in that sense. I would love to see, for instance, for those of us that work in higher ed, more of our faculty and even presidents being more out there on LinkedIn. Like you see the CEOs of Gap, of Goldman Sachs. I mean, you know, goodness sake, sometimes they're posting social justice messages that are way ahead of what our CEOs are doing. So, you know, I think there are ways around it. I agree that is something we hear too. We're trying to be more segmented.
Louis, how much do you think of it as budget and staffing? I mean, because I think most people on this call, Louis just froze when I asked about budget and staffing. So, you know, if a VP for advancement or a president.
Okay, I don't think that's the real problem. I think the real problem is excessive quality assurance. So too much QA. So think of the last piece of content you tried to get out. You know, how many rounds of approval that had to go through, that wordsmithing to death, that's not really adding value after a time. It's just kind of an ego matter, right? And those videos, really what works are videos that are pretty raw. I mean, for our standard, it's funny that we have such nonprofits, we think that we're so kind of behind the times and we're trying to be always more sophisticated, but most of our production is very, you know, at a very high standard. But it's kind of the irony that people are seeking content that's more raw, more authentic. So for instance, and I'll give you an example of things I'm doing now. I'm writing our monthly donors and our loyal donors, people that have given for 5 years or more, every 2 to 3 weeks. I'm sending them a quick update, kind of just personal from me with a video sometimes. This was based on research that one of our presenters did. They ran annual funds for dioceses around the country. Mm-hmm. And they discovered that this approach increased the retention rate of donors that received it, this treatment, let's say, increased the retention rate by more than 50%. So that's a really simple thing that everybody can do. Take your monthly donors and your really loyal donors that are not assigned to a gift officer and just keep in touch with them. I was speaking with James Barnard, who was a member of our group until he turned into a consultant and we had to kick him out. and he was telling his teams about sports teams. And I don't know if the Orioles do this. I have a feeling they probably do. Where if you're a subscriber, if you even just bought a ticket, it's, you know, you subscribe for life to a message like probably weekly or every few weeks from your rep there. And it's just a text message, really simple, just checking in with you, but it really does work. So, and this firm kind of proved it for us. So I hope that answers Vince and Heather and gives some ideas. Hi, Nicole.
Hi. So I wanted to touch back on Vince's comment in the chat about maybe not more communications, but better communications. One of the things that I think many of us struggle with is we don't want to inundate our donors. We don't want to over communicate. We don't want to be in their face. But I think what we've forgotten is donors are looking to us to be the authority in the area that we work in. So if our communications are planned and we have themes, we have communication schedules, I agree with you. That raw video does so much more and goes so much farther than something that's very polished. But if you are just putting more words out into the universe, you're not doing anything. If you are sharing and being the authority on something, and I've just recently come back to higher ed from a social services fundraising organization. And for us, we fed people. We had a recovery program. We were the authority on people in need in our area. And therefore, we had multiple segments to talk to. The people who were supporting our work and wanted to know what their dollars were doing, but the people who needed our services. So by drawing back, and we actually, throughout the pandemic, drew back from 1 to 2 posts a week on social media, on Facebook, to expanding to 4 social media platforms and hitting it 2 to 3 times a day on each platform, because our content was more meaningful to the community that we were trying to reach. So I completely agree. I don't think you can communicate too much, but you have to have something to say. And it's got to be something that people are looking for. And it's a connection, it's informing, it's showing what the gift is doing. So there, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Nicole. Of course, it has to be done right? But what I'm going after is that the more typical problem is not that we do things the wrong way. The more typical problem is that we just get stuck so bad in all our internal drama, and nothing gets done. And there's also kind of a lot of research where, you know, artists that are more, you know, you think like to be more creative, they have to, you know, do less and think about things for more time, when on average, there may be people like that, but on average, it's the more productive ones, because they're producing and they're doing it. And who was it that said inspiration hits them when they're working? So it's the same thing. Like if you ramp up that level of communications, you're going to notice pretty quickly what's not, you know, what is those words, those garbage words out there, and what is quality. But you have to kind of be there. You have to be in the game. That might take, you know, it's a little bit, you know, counter the usual, but thank you, Nicole. I think you're totally right. So this is great. I'm scrolling through the chat to see if anybody, there was a couple of questions about monthly donors. And was anybody testing anything? And I see a few others from Steen, and then Rachel had a few questions about monthly. Rachel, if you're on the call while you scroll, feel free to just go ahead and ask your questions. I think Vince can reply to this better than I can. The 80-20 is not that anymore. It's more like 95-5 or more. You know,
this is Rachel.
Oh, hi, Rachel.
Hi, this is my question about monthly giving. So I'm interested in programs that have kind of started managing this or have managed this for a long time. For instance, I think that my local food bank kind of knows that I'm a monthly donor and is probably managing it that way. However, I think it's kind of new to higher ed to pay deep attention to your kind of monthly donor base, at least like from what I've seen or what I've discussed, but I'm kind of new to annual giving. So I'm kind of interested in how people think about stewarding monthly giving donors. The gift processing is probably less of a big question mark than how do you effectively steward monthly giving groups?
Absolutely. So when we converted our giving site to default to monthly, I was said that was bold, that was crazy, etc. It's worked. It hasn't demotivated people that wanted to give their one-time gifts. It's very clearly marked. It's all above line. And if you don't want to make, a monthly gift, you just click one time. It's the same option you do in the opposite direction. So stewardship is interesting. And when we heard about what public radio does, they spoke about stewardship, which is great because you free up a lot of time and attention that would go to resoliciting people, and you can dedicate it to stewarding people. There's also great opportunity in upgrades. So you want to steward people because in a year, you can give them a call and ask for an upgrade. And you can do a lot of that on the phone. The phone is very effective. So that's another way we're we are, there was supposedly that decline in phone fundraising. And that's gone around. And this Charity Water, right, does a fantastic example. They kind of have their own site and their own community. I wrote a little bit about that on LinkedIn, but it can be as simple as just staying in touch with them, having webinars, having town hall meetings that are for your monthly donors. It doesn't take a whole lot more resources. And if you can get some leadership to jump on a call, that's about it. And just putting them in touch with the impact of what they're doing in a very real way, just like we're doing here today. Does that kind of help, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Liz.
Exactly. Recognition is huge. Thank you, Heather. I'll just read her comment because it's so good. Using electronic newsletters to highlight gifts and thank donors, virtual webinars have become big now. So my kind of angle on that is just like this meeting, we're seeing each other, that don't be careful that the webinar doesn't turn into a one-way communication. And if not, we're right back where we started, which is us pushing content, at people instead of developing content with them. We don't. Do you have a society formal name for monthly giving? We do not. In my specific case, the best practice is to have one. We just haven't gotten there yet. We're thinking about folding it into our loyalty society, just because they share a lot of the same characteristics. The retention rate is similarly high. So we looked at our data. People that have given more than 3 times in one fiscal year had a retention rate of over 90%. Admittedly, they were starting at a pretty high level just because of the nature of Muhlenberg College, which is a pretty tight-knit community, but that was it. Yes, inside scoop. Thank you, Heather. So the factors that build trust. So how do you what is even trust? How do you define it? How do you even get trust? I was reading a fair amount of research. The one I liked the best was trust. People evaluate trust along 4 kind of areas. Is 1, are you honest? 2, are you benevolent? So do you have their best interests in mind? 3, are you competent? And 4, are you open to feedback? So I think things like a town hall with the president or CEO can achieve all of those at once. So that's why these things are fairly effective. Parameters for loyalty society are 5 years of giving in a row. I think that's too much because I'd like it for it to be 3, because that's a little bit more of the typical cutoff point. But that's where we are. It's it's imperfect. We're trying, like everybody else, really. Lots of different directions. It's true, right? It's a so Steve Backer, who's a donor participation project member, hi Steve, and works at an independent school in St. Louis. Lots of different directions: trust, monthly giving, more content, stewardship. Oh my. What is the first practical thing an organization should do to start doing to increase donor participation? So a lot of what happens, right? The annual fund person is kind of low on the totem pole, doesn't feel very empowered to start programs or to do a lot. We worry a lot in this group of, what can that person do? Or what can the one person development officer do? So communicating. I mean, everybody has email, everybody can do mail merge. everybody can pick out their unassigned loyal donors and just start writing them. And just start from there. I mean, actually just do it and ask them what they want to hear about. Try to find a benefit, somebody that demonstrates impact, somebody that you're helping. Get them on a Zoom and just start from there. And then maybe 1 month you call a Zoom session. Most of us have some Teams or Zoom or Google Meet, some type of video conferencing now included at work. And start there. Next time you solicit them, you're starting off kind of on a warm relationship versus the usual. Which is just solicit. Yeah, I don't know. Is this helping? I'm just Heather, authenticity. Yes, definitely. I agree. Yes, I agree with you. And sometimes people measure authenticity just by how unpolished it looks, honestly. And we see that with appeals, right? Traditionally, there were these appeals that were so ugly. These letters that looked like somebody had, I don't know, typed them on their niece's typing machine, and then they work so well. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. So yes, what we first do. To Nicole's point earlier about communications, I totally agree with you. The thing is, sometimes we get so stuck in the communication defining and approval cycle that we end up just saying, oh my goodness, we never got this out, we never got that out, but it's appeal time and we need the money, so let's get this out. So we fall back into, we're just soliciting, So that's kind of what I've noticed, and that's happened to us when the opposites of, when they say a 3-to-1 ratio of non-solicitation to solicitation would be good. I've read places that said 7-to-1 in kind of tech firms and such. So there's lots of people thinking about this. So Vince, do you have anything to add other than Bloomberg? Well, thank you, Karen.
I think you've heard me say Bloomberg quite a few times. So if you had $1 for every time I said Bloomberg, Muhlenberg would be doing great. But I think the first step is acknowledging that it is a problem, and acknowledging maybe that most people, I think, will do that, but acknowledging that it is and should be addressed. And I think a lot of people have just been doing the same old, or even worse, maybe just figuring, well, that's just the natural trend. And then you've got these institutions right down the street that walk and talk a lot like your institution, and they're doing much better because they're addressing it. They're making it a priority. Their president, their vice president for advancement, their board members are saying it's important to do this for a laundry list of good reasons. So I think the first step is just acknowledging it. And then, I think it's a competitive world out there. So if school A starts doing really great, the president of school B is going to say, hey, what's going on down the street there? So, we lead by example. It's a competitive world. But if we all make it a priority and do it right, join the donor participation project, talk with your friends and colleagues, look at what you get from your college or high school, it's absolutely fixable. But it's only going to get harder every day and every year we let it slide. So I would do it this afternoon. Thanks, Lois.
Send an email. Really, it's not spam. If it's valuable and it's to the right people, you can do it on your own. You can just do it this afternoon. On Monday, I recorded myself on video with
Lewis is going to remain frozen until we address this problem. This is his personal protest. You guys better get to work. He's really frozen, isn't he? Oh. I'm sorry, guys, we might have just lost Lewis there. And again, as a former protest, until we all take care of this very important concern, I think that's it for Lewis. Let me see if he can get back on. I think he's actually lost the connection. Do you want to wait 1 or 2 minutes, and then we're pretty much close to the end of the time there. I can try actually calling him, which is a great way to reach out to your supporters. Old school.
Hi, everybody.
Oh.
Hi. I'm so sorry. I got disconnected and
Well, Louis, it proves our point. You left me in charge for a few minutes, which is, as most of you know, never a good idea. But if you actually call people, they will respond. I didn't even connect with you on the phone. Just the threat of a call got you.
That's true. But is it so to answer the question, volunteers. Number one, I did a project called Heroes in Donor Participation. I took the, is everybody here familiar with the VSE survey? They survey higher ed institutions for, it's a benchmarking for advancement. And it's really good because higher ed institutions are really good at keeping their data and providing it. So even if you're not in higher ed, it's of certain interest. And I looked at the universities that had been able to increase their donor participation over a period of 10 years and that weren't like obviously cheating. Like, well, yeah, if they reduced their number of alums on record by half, you know, something needs to happen. So, you know, something iffy was going on. So I took those out and I spoke with them. There were institutions like Morehouse, not really the big ones, like Elon, like Villanova. So it was really interesting to speak with those. Yes, Vince is, you can always count on Vince for this. So I spoke with them and all of them had very rigorous volunteer programs and active volunteer programs. At the same time, I was hearing some alumni, you know, leaders saying reunions are a thing of the past and, you know, that throw them away and all those volunteers, I could get more money from a letter. Well, that's not the value of this. The value is all those volunteers that you're engaging and connecting and their connections with others and the trust building that's happening. So for instance, our reunion program, our class agent program had 50 people when I joined Muhlenberg College about 2 years ago. We're at 89 now. We're targeting 150. So literally we're trying to increase it threefold. So if you're in a nonprofit setting where something like that is possible, the very typical example is when your board is not good, you know, it's not a good fundraising board, and then you're starting a campaign, and Vince can speak about this, then you create a kind of a campaign board, right? That's a very typical thing that some foundations do. All types, you can do events as simply, committee engagement as simply as to do an event. And again, the value is not that you're fundraising for the event. So lots of us will say, oh, events, it's so much work. Well, yes, it is if you're doing all the work. If the point of it is to develop a committee and you maybe have some major gift prospects in there and you're having them do some of the work and developing those relationships there, then it's a whole new layer of value. You know, and things like golf tournaments and that and such. So does that kind of answer a little bit? Mark Twain is an unofficial member of this webinar today. And thank you.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure he actually said those things, but he got credit for them, so. Oh,
and folks, the t-shirt is right here. I guess I didn't share it earlier.
And the recent Mark Twain quote I posted is, Louis very, very importantly, I think, said, you know, the statistics and the evaluation very important, but, you know, are they real? You know, sometimes folks may play a little bit with the participation numbers. You want the real participation numbers. And so that's why I often use that Mark Twain quote that there are three kinds of lies, damn lies, and statistics. Statistics and evaluation, all that stuff very important, but do keep that in mind that it needs to be a good evaluation.
Yeah. So, and I can't see the previous question. So Vince or anybody else, please feel free to chat in. Another key to the value of working in groups. I was doing some research and there's something called vulnerability loops, and you can look it up. There are TED Talks about it. It's apparently the quickest way to build trust with a group of people who you may or may not know. There are other ways to build trust. Just, if you're around for 100 years, people will trust you. If you advertise and you're all the time on television, so just sheer exposure, or my kids watching YouTube 28 hours a day, then they trust those YouTube stars. But the quickest way, and honestly, the one that doesn't require every nonprofit to be a YouTube influencer, is doing these type of group activities, and because they create these relationships and vulnerability loops that are really where trust is created, and then that leads to all types of positive things. So that's a little bit of the theory. I know, like why exactly, why are you doing it? And folks may be asking about examples. I shared in the chat earlier, like, yeah, Louis, all this sounds very exciting. Yeah, but is it real? I took what we learned about monthly giving. I was fortunate enough to have leadership at my organization that let me run with it. And I can say it works. We did it, it works. We went from 24 sustainer donors. We call them sustainer because not all of them are monthly. Some of them are quarterly or annual. We're at 580 something. So, hi, Joe. No, I don't know if that was a question.
Louis, Monica asked a question that she said, you talked about identifying development leaders other than board members. What kinds of unofficial leadership roles have you created for volunteers? And certainly if you can answer that, but I borrowed an idea, because we all do borrow ideas from other folks, and I encourage that. From the Archdiocese of Baltimore, their Partners in Excellence Scholarship Program, they have what's called advocates. And all they ask you to do is follow, like, and share on whatever social media platform you're comfortable using. For some folks, that's all that. So I'm one of those folks that when I see that, I like it, I share it, I comment, I do that stuff. Very easy way to get people involved. And just looking at that program, there's people I don't know, and there's corporate CEOs that are liking and sharing stuff. They feel very engaged, and when they like and share things and comment on things, it means a lot. So just a very sort of basic way to get people in there involved, and then they start feeling ownership.
Sure, and there's some advice that says make the first asks achievable, and non-threatening. So if you go in, and that kind of has changed a little bit nowadays. It used to be where like the first step could be some type of committee membership. Maybe the first ask nowadays is something like what Vince is saying, just be an ambassador. Of course, the golden standard is that it's PPRI, right? It's participatory, it's purposeful, which this is, it's somewhat participatory, it's recurring, so it's not just a one-off. Then you identify leaders, which you're doing by seeing who actually does it, right? And then probably that gives you all types of signals as to and Monica's question about leadership, all types of volunteers, class agents, boards, committees. There's a lot of hesitation with these things. I would say if done well, they can be really good, but you have to be good as to setting those PPRI parameters. What's the purpose? How can people contribute? How often are we doing this? And what is everybody's role on it? And so, you do all that so that you get the maximum value from it. That's at least the way I think about it. Well, we're nearing the end of the hour. I don't know if we have any closing remarks, but in any case, I have to say I enjoyed this a whole lot. It was great to get to meet so many of you. I'm sorry we couldn't chat more. But if you would like to continue the conversation, we have smaller groups in some of our sessions at Donor Participation. Feel free to sign up. Just Google it, Donor Participation Project. It should come up. Connect with Vince on LinkedIn. He's pretty great. And he might call you. Be careful. He's really good at the phone.
It's not a desk phone, though. I want to stress that. I turned off my desk phone. Just this.
Armed and dangerous.
Yes.
This has been great. We welcome all feedback. Please feel free to reach out and continue this conversation. We really have to do it together and kind of figure out how to turn this around.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Louis. Thank you very much, Louis.
Thank you.